Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, guys, whether you're watching me on YouTube or on Rumble. On this channel, we analyze political events. We address the political events from geopolitical perspective. For example, in the last episode or in the last live streaming, I hosted Alistair Crook, who is or was a former senior British diplomat, and also he was part of the MI6. He served with Javier Solana, and he has a big experience in the Middle East. And we listened to his perspective, insight, and wisdom about the conflict or the war or the onslaught in Gaza and also in Ukraine, which happened that I share most of his perspectives, right? So we analyze these cases in this channel from a geopolitical perspective. However, there are also certain personalities, journalists, podcasters, talking heads, whether on YouTube or on mainstream media. These people also shape the narratives. And because the narratives are important in order to convince the people to believe in certain political event, which is, of course, underneath is a geopolitical conflict, I believe that it's also important for me to address these certain very particular events, for example, firing of Candace Owens. I myself, I'm not a big fan of turning on my TV and watching podcasts. Sometimes I watch when I'm having a lunch, when I'm having a dinner. To be honest with you, I don't have much time to watch, let's say, 1.5 hour, 2 hour podcast. But sometimes I watch segments. Sometimes on X, people just post the best of any podcast, for example. But on the conservative side in the United States, there are certain personalities who are very, very influential among the conservative people, and they're trying to shape and reshape the narratives, right? One of which is, for example, Ben Shapiro, which I despise personally, Jordan Peterson, who recently blocked me on X for pointing out to the crimes of the Israelis in the Gaza Strip, Matt Walsh, for example, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Patrick Bet-David, and even Zuby, has becoming more influential in these conservative circles in the United States. And I'm being very, very honest with you guys. Even when I watch these short segments on X or anywhere from these personalities, when they speak about foreign policy, I'm being very particular, very, very precise. Only when they speak about foreign policy or geopolitical cases, I feel like they are giving a lesson for dummies, right? And a person who is in elementary school in Syria can actually speak, understand, and analyze these political events better than they do. My feeling is that most of these talking heads, because they are successful, for example, in business and happen to be podcasters, they start also speaking about foreign policy that they know nothing about. They have no clue. They read some Wikipedia articles or they listen to someone on other podcasts and they come and repeat it. And that's why it becomes really sometimes embarrassing for them when they host an expert. For example, Bassem Youssef is not an expert. He is a comedian, but he has done his homework and he has learned about the Arab-Israeli conflict. He went back for a few hundred years back to see and learn about the history of anti-Semitism in Europe, which led to the rise of the Zionist trend or the Zionist movement in late 18th century or the 19th century, and which led later to the promise of Balfour Declaration and the creation of Israel, etc., etc. So when you put, for example, Bassem Youssef with Patrick Bet-David or anyone, the other guy also in his podcast, it feels embarrassing because these guys know nothing about the history of the conflict, and sometimes they are careless because it doesn't touch them personally. It doesn't harm them personally. It doesn't affect them personally. But it does for us as citizens of the world. Rest assured, guys, even if you're not interested in politics, politics is interested in you. And what's happening in the Gaza Strip will eventually affect you personally. Because if we normalize what's happening in the Gaza Strip, if similar incidents happen in your country in the future, you will find people are careless about your suffering. And we cannot really continue in this path. And when Candace Owens, she hosted, for example, at the beginning, what was his name? The professor of the expert on Gaza, Norman Finkelstein, right? She hosted several guests, pro-Palestine and pro-Israel. And it seems that she has made up her mind based on the fact that Israel has been committing crimes, horrendous crimes against the Palestinians in the Palestinian territories, but also she realized that Israel has an enormous influence over the foreign policy of the United States, and herself, as this is just my personal and subjective interpretation, right? And herself being a conservative isolationist who says, why are we funding the wars in Ukraine? And why are we sending billions of dollars to Israel, right? In my opinion, from this point of view, she started criticizing Israel more and more, and I think she touched the nerves. And it's a taboo to criticize Israel or the Israeli lobby or the Israeli influence in the United States in such a way, especially that she's working for the Daily Wire. And the Daily Wire is founded by Ben Shapiro. And Ben Shapiro, although he's an American, but he's more Israeli than an American, right? Like he wants to serve the Israeli interest more than the American interest. And he believes that all Americans have to be pro-Israel. Anyways, now that you have a few psychopaths on social media, for example, this Shmuley and those so-called rabbis, right? And in my opinion, I also have given you my opinion about Rabbi Shmuley and some very radical Zionists on X. Their job, guys, is to spread radical ideas on X on purpose and provoke the people or the general public on purpose in order to create a backlash against the Jewish people. They don't care about the well-being of the Jewish people. In fact, they are craving for any sort of verbal harassment or physical violence against the Jewish people to play the victim role and try to rationalize what the Israeli side is doing in the Gaza Strip by saying, look, people hate us. This is the only place that we are safe. And that's why we have all to go to Israel and serve Israel. And we have to justify what Israel is doing there. Look, anyone on my channel, if I see anyone saying anything against the Jews as a Jewish people, if I see it, I will block it. I do not want to. This channel is about quality content. I don't want to speak about races as races or religions as religions. However, when this Rabbi Shmuley, he is speaking from and saying that we, the Jewish people, and then he continues his statement in a very, very provocative way, in an illogical way, he is just trying to spread stereotypes about the Jewish people and also hatred towards the Jewish people in order to create negative sentiments against the Jewish people as collective and attract any sort of violence against them in order to play the victim role. And there are people nowadays, guys, on X who pretend to be pro-Palestine, and they are spreading hatred against the Jewish people collectively. And these people's job, in my opinion, they are doing the bidding of the Mossad. And they are probably employed by the Mossad to spread hatred against the Jewish people, to create this backlash and create this impression that the Jews are under existential threat and there is a spike in anti-Semitism. This is just my opinion. I may be correct, I may be wrong. Now that Candace Owens came under attack by the ADL, Anti-Defamation Act, for example, only yesterday, by the way, they posted this on their Twitter account. And this came only they say white supremacist and Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes is praising Candace Owens' vitriolic anti-Semitism. It's hardly surprising, but it doesn't set off alarm bells. When bigoted people come together to push an anti-Semitic agenda, it adds fuel to the fire of hate. If you go to the time, it's around 8 p.m. Central European time yesterday. So even less than 12 hours later, Candace Owens was fired from her platform that she used to work. And this is the article. They say Candace Owens has been signaling our Jewish people to attack in recent weeks. Owens' recent commentary has caught the attention of notorious anti-Semite Nick Fuentes, who said on his show that she has been in full-fledged war against the Jews. This is what I say, guys. These people trying to completely make this about a Jewish case, those are really serving the Zionist lobby. Fuentes is a white supremacist leader who attended the deadly 2017 Unite the Right giant white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, called for a white uprising to install Trump as a dictator, and has generated a lengthy list of bigoted statements, including his recent exhortation for Jews to, quote, get the fuck out of America. He is also a Holocaust denier. So this type of people come and express solidarity with people like Candace Owens, and then her reputation is tarnished, right? You just need someone like him to praise you, and then you are completely screwed. And 12 hours later, she has been kicked out and fired from her job. And remember what this so-called Rabbi Shmuley told Candace a few days ago, also on X, and he promised her that he will come after her finances, and he will make her poor again. I mean, what they're doing here is basically, unfortunately speaking, they are just if somebody comes like Candace and says the Israeli lobby has a big influence over the American politics, and people like this rabbi say, oh, this is anti-Semitic, you cannot mention that, you cannot say that, and then come after her employment and kick her out of her job, you're just you're making the point, you're proving the point that she's correct, right? And although Candace herself came and said, look, I don't know who is this guy, this Fuentes guy is, right? I don't know him. And you guys are making up stuff about me. I don't know who Nick Fuentes, but you already know that. What I do know is that everyone can see what you guys are doing to me. Your pattern is well established and the world is waking up to it. My crime is having stood up for myself against your network of smears. Now, it seems that Candace, she didn't know that she's going to be kicked out of her job. And this was only yesterday on her show. She said, we will see you tomorrow for a brand new episode.
In a few weeks, I will be different for me. I'm just asking to be left alone, or at least just report the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. But don't worry, because we will see you tomorrow for a brand new episode.
I mean, look, I just want to say something here. I know that she's playing tough, and she says, I only fear God, I don't fear you, etc., etc. But in my opinion, this is just my humble opinion, after a very, very tough experience myself, very difficult experience myself here in Germany, that journalists should not try to play the role of the martyr, right? You shouldn't put yourself in the harm's way. You should continue speaking the truth, but the style is very important. For example, when I came in Germany in 2015, I was 27 years old. I'm 36 years old now. I'm 9 years probably wiser now, right? Back then, I was more a young person. I was like on fire, I didn't make so much calculations. I wasn't really wise enough like now. And I, for example, I said things that provoked the media, right? I poked the bear in the eye. And what I'm saying now in 2024 is the same message that I said in 2016. But back then, I was telling it in a very provocative way. I was poking the eye of the bear. I was going and tagging all these mainstream media journalists, saying how liar they are about what they do in Syria, for example. And I communicated with the left-wing party, by the way, back then. This is an information that I never mentioned, called the Linke Party. This was in 2015, late 2015 or early 2016. And I offered my expertise on the Syrian conflict, because I was on the ground in Syria reporting as well, that I want to give a speech or a presentation about the Syrian war. And they were very happy, etc. And they wanted to organize an event. After a few days, they came back to me canceling the event again, because they said some of your opinions about Israel, quote, embarrasses us, right? So they were afraid to host me to speak about the Syrian case, because they didn't like, or they were afraid of my opinion about Israel, for example. But then one of my friends, who was from the right-wing party, he invited me to the event of his political party, and he said, if you want to come and say something about the Syrian case, come and say. And I went to the event thinking that we are in a free country, right? So I gave my opinion about what's happening in Syria, about the lies they spread about Syria, especially when it comes to the so-called moderate rebels. And I said how they are lying to the Europeans that they are moderate rebels seeking democracy, human rights, etc., etc. In the contrary, these people are regressive. They are calling for an Islamic state in Syria. All these things, and also address the root cause of the refugee crisis. And I said that accepting refugees is a humane and noble task. However, how about not creating a refugee crisis from the first place, right? Why would you create a refugee crisis? The people were not really aware that actually the foreign policy of the United States and some of the European capitals were responsible of creating the refugee crisis, right? It was easier to not create the war and keep the refugees in Syria or the Syrian people in Syria, right? And they didn't like that. And I also said back then, you shouldn't really receive the people who triggered the war in Syria, who caused the war in Syria, who made troubles in Syria, right? There should be a background check, for example, for the people who coming here. And I said, I escaped from some of the people that I met here in Germany, those who caused troubles in the country. So I was very, very brutally attacked by the German mainstream media. They tried to revoke my residence permit. They tried to deport me from the country. They made huge scandals about me. They translated it to Arabic. They said all sorts of lies. Guys, it doesn't matter what they say about you, because once it's printed or once it's been said on TV or on any website, it's done. Even if you have a lawyer and you want to correct that, it takes so much time. And after 1 year, for example, I managed to correct so many of these lies about myself with the help of a lawyer. But the conception or the perception about me was already formed. And when they translated all these things to Arabic, for example, I would just give you one example. In 2016, I said Erdogan is using the refugees as a weapon of mass destruction against Europe. My interpretation for it, and it's a long speech, that Erdogan is weaponizing the refugees and sending them to Europe to blackmail Europe and then to create domestic troubles inside Europe, because he also, Turkey and Qatar, they finance some of the mosques here, right? So they can use these refugees. And what the media said about me, that I called the refugees that they are weapons of mass destruction. This is not what I said. I said Erdogan sees them as a weapons of mass destruction. He is weaponizing them. And this is the same evaluation of the German Verfassungsschutz, which is the domestic intelligence, right, of Germany. The same thing that they evaluated, I said it, but they interpreted it differently, and they published it in Arabic. They said Kevork calls the refugees as ticking bombs. They even changed that. And then all these anti-Assad refugees started to hate me. When you walked in the streets, they start attacking you, verbally harassing you, physically attacking you, and everything. Like it, my life turned upside down. So what I'm trying to say is the truth is not really important for them. What is really important for them is what they say. When they say you're an anti-Semite, you're going to be in a position to defend yourself and try to prove that you're not an anti-Semite. And once you do that, they win. Believe me. Once you start defending yourself, they win. And on the other side, myself, for example, when they say, oh, he hates the refugees, like I'm coming from Syria, why would I hate the refugees, right? They don't speak logically at all. But once you try to defend yourself, you lose this battle, because still they're the most strong. They're very, very strong guys, and they hold all the financial means and the journalistic means and everything to manipulate the people and to also distort your image and to destroy your reputation, etc., etc. And it's a very hard job. That's why I'm making this video about. I made it. In the first part is going to be about Candace Owens, because I think that this is some sort of a pattern nowadays for the people who try to speak the truth about any particular case. If this case is sensitive, they come to destroy you. Now, Candace Owens has the right to criticize Israel for the crimes Israel is committing in the Gaza Strip. And I don't know, guys, if you watched this video, but there is a new video. I hope that YouTube is not going to delete this live streaming, because I saw that I know it's it's blurred and they don't show any graphic content. But so Al Jazeera has acquired leaked Israeli drone footage showing the Israeli forces killing 4 unarmed Palestinians in Khan Yunis using drone strike. This is so dystopian, guys, that they are just using drones to hunt down humans walking. Imagine if they're doing it in Gaza, what could they do in the future for other people? The footage clearly shows to terrorize and instill fear in Palestinians as means to coerce them into leaving Gaza permanently. I will show you this video, and there are subtitles you can also read. And yeah, let's see. How can you watch such a video and not criticize Israel? Seriously. This is so dystopian that they are watching 3 Palestinian men, youth, unarmed. They can check and double check with their drones and see that they are unarmed and they're just walking peacefully, and they hunt them like they are flies, right? How can you watch this video and not go on your social media platform and not report about it, not criticize Israel, and not to try to expose the Israeli crimes there? And how is it possible that nowadays there are still people justifying this? Unless there is someone who is completely brainwashed or paid by Israel, there is no person who has the minimum humanity in him can watch this footage and not criticize Israel. There is none. It's impossible. What Israel is doing is so inhumane, it's abhorrent, right? And I hope every single Israeli criminal and leader criminal would be in Hague very soon, which I rule out that, right? I don't have this big confidence in rules-based order, blah, blah, blah. All the world can see what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip, documented on video, right? And all these Western leaders are still saying that Israel has the right to defend itself. How is it this is a defense? How can you say this is a self-defense? The 32,000 Palestinians dead, and those are only the numbers that they were able to count. How many of these bodies were completely destroyed and unrecognizable that the health ministry and the people who are counting the bodies couldn't even recognize or know who are they to document them, right? The numbers could be way higher than what we think is. And they're trying to create the impression that those numbers are fake. These people, I really suspect, if they are really like us, like they have a humanity in them or not. Those who are making the justifications. And I saw a comment for Alex Jones, which surprised me because they restored him on X after this October 7 attacks. And he was defending Israel recently. And this is what he said on his account. He says, Israel has lost the high ground. This is not war. It's robotic mass genocide. Section 1091 of Title 18, United States Code, prohibits genocide, whether committed in time of peace or time of war. Genocide is defined in 1091 and in Article 1091 and includes violent attacks with the specific intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. I mean, it took him 5 months to realize this. We've been saying this from day one. It was so obvious from day one. What Israel is doing, completely destroy Gaza, make it uninhabitable, destroy the Palestinians physically, morally, spiritually, create the conditions that they would voluntarily leave because life has turned hell in the Gaza Strip, right? This is not some sort of conspiracy theory. Israeli politicians are saying that this is their plans. And if we are in March 2024 and there are still people who are suspicious about it or not really outspoken about these crimes, please encourage them to do. We have to add more pressure on Israel. This has to stop. This has to stop. And famine, guys. Do you know what famine is? Has any of you guys were in a situation where you had a lack of food? You didn't eat for a few days. Maybe you fasted. But were you forced not to eat because there is no food? Did you had that feeling? Did you live the experience of starvation? You don't know what starvation means. Most of us, 99% of us, we don't know. I know people in Syria who starved. I know people in Syria that now they cannot put food on the table because of the sanctions, because of the brutality of the war. There are people who live less than $1 per day in Syria, right? There are fathers who go to sleep with an empty bellies in order to feed their children because they don't have enough money to buy the food. But in Gaza, even if you have money, you may not find the food, right? Starvation, malnutrition. And this is coming now, the new report from the World Health Organization. They say famine in Gaza is imminent with immediate and long-term health consequences. The latest analysis from the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Partnership released today warns that the situation in Gaza is catastrophic, with northern Gaza facing imminent famine and the rest of the Strip at risk as well. Before the crisis, there was enough food in Gaza to feed the population. Malnutrition was a rare occurrence. Now people are dying and many more are sick. Over 1 million people are expected to face catastrophic hunger unless significantly more food is allowed to enter Gaza. Before the recent months' hostilities, 0.8% of children under 5 years of age were actually malnourished. Today's report shows that as of February, the northern governorates, that figure is between 12.4 and 16.5%. Without a significant and immediate increase in deliveries in food, water, and other essential supplies, conditions will continue deteriorating. Virtually all the households are already skipping meals every day, and adults are reducing their meals so that the children can eat. The current situation will have long-term effects on the lives and health of thousands. Right now, children are dying from the combined effects of malnutrition and disease. Malnutrition makes people more vulnerable to getting severely ill, experiencing slow recovery, or dying when they are infected with a disease. The long-term effects of malnutrition, low consumption of nutrient-rich foods, repeated infections, and lack of hygiene and sanitation services slow children's overall growth. This compromises the health and well-being of an entire future generation. It really bothers me. For example, there are people, I met them during the Corona era, and they are influential people on X and elsewhere, and they've been pushing against these tyrannical measures that they forced upon the people, and especially arguing that these measures harm the children, right? And they do. And they did. Now that thousands of children are getting killed, these people are just like there is nothing happening there. They just continue their lives, giving their dating advices on social media platforms, giving their gym tips on social media platforms. No, this is an emergency. You have to speak about these cases, even if your niche is not about this. You have to speak about this complete inhumane situation in the Gaza Strip. Whoever you are, you must speak, even if you're a makeup artist, even if you're an engineer, even if you're a doctor. Only collective action can end this. And people are like, it's like nothing happening. Let me teach you today how can you date a woman and what to tell her. Or let me tell you how can you lose belly fat. I totally understand this is your niche, right? And you want to keep it on X, for example, non-political. But when you spoke about the pandemic, it was political, and you were interested in it. How is the situation in Gaza is not political for you? How does it not affect you when you watch all this footage and pictures? Excuse me. I get really mad when I see these people like completely detach themselves from this case, right? Because you cannot claim that you care about the children during the Corona era when you see all these children are getting murdered by drones, and you don't say anything about it. It doesn't work that way. Tucker Carlson also, it seems that he softly criticized Israel, but from an American lens. And I will let you first watch it.
Israel and the implied security guarantees, some explicit, but many implied security guarantees of the United States to Israel probably haven't helped Israel that much long term. It's a rich country with a highly capable population. Like every other country, it's probably best if it makes its decisions based on what it can do by itself. And I don't see any advantage to the United States. I mean, I think it's important for each country to make its own decisions. Again, I don't think you can overstate the lack of wisdom, weakness, short-term thinking of American foreign policy leadership. These are the architects of the Iraq War, of the totally pointless destruction of Libya, totally pointless destruction of Syria, and the 20-year occupation of Afghanistan that resulted in a return to the status quo. So like of the Vietnam War, their track record of the Korean War, even going back 80 years, is uninterrupted failures. I just don't have any confidence in those leaders to improve. When was the last time they improved another country?
Yeah. I really don't know why they keep giving interview to this guy. Or maybe only because he's famous, the other podcaster anyways. Why would the United States give all this money and taxpayer money to the Israelis, right? And why would the neocons make the foreign policy of the United States intermarried with the Zionists? And why would Israel serve as a force in the region that keeps the region in a constant trouble? Why can't the Americans change approach and change course? Why don't they pursue peace? And when I say peace, please, nobody should come and tell me that the United States tried to create peace in the region. They always try to create political compromises with Israel in favor of Israel, not peace agreements. See what's happening in Egypt with the economic crisis. See what's happening in Jordan. These countries who strike peace deals with Israel, they are not really flourishing countries, right? And now the Europeans are bribing Egypt to receive the 2 million Palestinian refugees, a new Nakba, as Alistair Cook yesterday called it, in exchange for paying him $8.1 billion or even more, he said. It's crazy. It's crazy. And the hypocrisy of all the situation is that what's happening in Ukraine, oh my God, it's horrendous. It's horrendous. For them, it's what's happening in Ukraine is beyond their imagination. It's something that everyone has to speak about. It's something that is the worst catastrophe that happened in the 21st century. And what happened in the Gaza Strip? Oh, okay, some people are dying. It's a self-defense. But when it comes to Ukraine, all these leaders come all together united with the same talking points, scripted, and now they're escalating against Russia in order to cause a direct conflict with Russia, which is going to be a horrible, horrible miscalculation and horrible war. I hope it never happens. And we have the Lithuanian foreign minister. It seems that he's very excited about this war and very excited about warmongering against Russia. And he says, he was on CNN, and he says, Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022 with 250,000 troops. Over 500,000 now occupy Ukraine. Russia will now mobilize an additional 500,000 troops. West's weak schizophrenic posture has given Russia all the time it needs to mobilize all aspects of society for total war against Europe. Let's take a look together.
So, you know, Foreign Minister, that some of the allies in NATO say, oh, the Baltics are screaming about, you know, the sky is falling, and we don't see necessarily war imminent.
Yeah, it's a very difficult debate, honestly. And, you know, we've been in that debate for, you know, as long as I can remember, specifically since 2014, where after the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements have been signed and a ceasefire was achieved, we've been telling to everybody that was willing to listen that Russia is not going to stop. We have not seen the last of them. And, the story was the same. We were told that, look, you have to calm down. You have your history behind you. We can argue with Russians and, we have this agreement in place. When the war broke out again in 2022, there were people coming out and saying, look, Baltics were right. And now you would hear Baltics saying exactly the same thing. Putin is not about to stop. Today, we're hearing a message from Putin's officials who are saying that they're going to recreate their army, basically, possibly mobilizing additionally up to 500,000 troops, additionally to what they currently have. They already have 1/3 more than they had before the start of the war in 2022. Now they're planning additionally to mobilize. What would they need it for?
If you are a foreign minister of a country, Lithuania or not Lithuania, and you think that 500,000 soldiers will occupy Europe, then you are either a complete moron and an idiot, or you are just a straight-faced liar. There is no other explanation for that. 500,000 soldiers cannot occupy even entire Ukraine, even if they want to. What it seems is happening in Ukraine now, Russians, after this recent election in Moscow and the re-election of Putin, it seems that they have changed the pace of the war from a special military operation into an all-out war. They say now we are at war with Ukraine. And if Russia, this is something that I spoke yesterday with Alistair Cook. Guys, if you didn't watch that, 15,000 people watched it. Amazing chat with Alistair Cook. You can watch it after this episode, after this live streaming. My impression is that Russia will wage a new offensive this summer, and the fortifications and the front lines of Ukraine will crumble, and the central government will also be weakened, and they will not be able to control the rest of Ukraine. And that's why the European countries, the Baltics, etc., they need to send, or they're speaking about sending troops, and they're escalating the situation against Russia because they want to send troops to Ukraine in order to keep these areas in their hands. Russia, in my opinion, they don't want to occupy Western Ukraine. The Western Ukraine is a very hostile soil for them. Socially speaking, demographically, etc., etc. It's a very hostile. It doesn't make any sense for them to occupy and create resistance against them and get killed in the discourse. Thousands of soldiers in every few weeks. Soldiers will die a lot if they occupy Western Ukraine. People there, they hate the Russian side with passion. And we've seen these experiences in the past. So they logically, militarily, financially, in every aspect, it doesn't make sense. It would be a huge stupid act by Russia if they occupy Western Ukraine. However, the second point that we have to speak about is Crimea. Crimea and the Black Sea. The Black Sea is the most important geopolitical aspect of this war, period. The first thing that Russia did after the coup in 2014, secure the Crimea, period. Because the new government that Nuland and the other neocons installed, they were going to sign on new laws and documents to kick out the Russian navy from the Black Sea. And if Russia is kicked out of the Black Sea, then Russia cannot have an access to the warm waters and also doesn't have an access to the Mediterranean, and it has a naval port in the Mediterranean. This is a geopolitical conflict. Now, Russia, it seems that their plan is to slowly grab the land and reach to Odessa. And if they reach to Odessa and they occupy Odessa, then Ukraine will become a landlocked country and they will lose the geopolitical importance. So the red line that the Europeans want to set is Odessa, because they want to have an access also to the through this geography to the Black Sea. And they want to keep Odessa under the control of the central government in Ukraine with their allies. So this is the overall the geopolitical conflict there. Now, Russia, as I mentioned, guys, changed its war in Ukraine. But before that, why is this escalation against Ukraine? And will Russia go Is Russia preparing for a large-scale conventional conflict with NATO? Are they going to invade the Baltic countries? I asked this question yesterday to Alistair Cook, right? And I'm going to show you his answer in case you didn't watch yesterday's episode. It's just 3 minutes. His answer is brilliant, in my opinion, and see why this escalation by the European side and the Baltic side against Russia, and why this fear-mongering that Russia is going to invade and wage a full-scale war against the NATO countries.
The report that you read out from that organization is nonsense. I think in the sense that there is absolutely no evidence at all that Putin or the leadership in Russia was planning to threaten any part of Europe. They were determined that NATO should not be actually on their borders in Ukraine, but they have never claimed an interest. And Putin has even said he doesn't really want, he understands that Poland and Romania and Hungary have claims on Western Ukraine. And if that's what happens in the future, they are actually more suited to go there than to join with Russia. So there's no evidence for this at all. What's happening, I think, is two things. This is, all this talk about Swedish children having to learn to sort of go under the desks at school is pure propaganda coming out of the European Union leadership and aimed at its own population, because we are in a real struggle about financing the European Union. The process, all these transitions and plans that the Europeans had, from the pandemic, but climate change to the greening project, all of these CO2 projects, required huge money printing to finance them. And this was all right so long as interest rates were zero. In Germany, they were actually negative, as you probably recall, during that period. So it cost nothing, effectively. And the ECB bought up sovereign bonds and then pushed money back into the system in this way. But now interest rates are up at 5.5%, and it's not possible. And the EU does not have a treasury. It doesn't have a treasury system. It cannot raise taxes. The Commission, the executive of the EU, cannot raise taxes and obtain cash directly because there's no treasury. There's no treasury equivalent to the US. It is all done through states. They have to raise the money through taxation, and then they contribute a portion to the European Union. But it's not like the United States at all. And so they don't know how they are going to get through the next process. So they need a lot more cash coming in order to try and, if you like, liquefy the system. And for defense is the new transition. Climate is out because it's becoming unpopular. We've got the farmers' protest. So they are looking at defense. But the magic bullet in all of this is they want to move to war bonds. War bonds not issued by individual states, by Germany, by Italy, but by the European Union itself, and begin the process of direct taxation and the direct raising of money for the European Union, which does not come through member states, and to increase its control over the European structures and states and peoples. So that's really what it's all about. It's about preparing the ground to try and move towards war bonds and even direct taxation of citizens in order to prepare for this great threat coming from Putin that we have to deal with, and we have to rebuild a defense industry from zero. And that's just going to be a slush fund, basically.
Wow. Guys, the lies that they tell, and I know because I come from the Middle East, and we know what they did to the Middle East and how they sold the lies. If you're an American, I'm from Syria, and the lies that they told you to sell the wars in the Middle East, abhorrent. They completely brainwashed their people. They waged information warfare and mass psychosis against you so that you accept these wars. Similarly, what's happening in the Gaza Strip. How is it possible that you can even equate between what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine, right? What's happening in Gaza, it's a clear-cut case, and there is a case against them at the ICJ under the Genocide Convention. And you have all the evidence you need in the world to convict Israel and the Israeli leaders. But we don't live in a fair world, so I understand that. And that's why I'm one of the proponents of the multipolarity. I want for alternative powers to rise, and I don't want for the United States to be collapsed or destroyed or anything. If they want to play their role, they can play their role. However, I want for alternative powers to rise and take their natural also duties and tasks in securing international security and especially securing the interests of the global South, which the global South nowadays sees and seeks and looks to China, to BRICS, to Russia as a liberator force. Whether you agree with the Beijing or Moscow, this is something else completely. Now Russia is declaring, guys, that they are in a state of war. No more SMO, no more special military operation. And so what does that mean? What does that mean that Russia is at war now? Due to a flurry of Western support for Ukraine, now escalating to ground troop insertions, Russia had to move its special military operation in Ukraine into the bigger scope of a full-fledged war. Over the last month, the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Directorate, GUR, and its Civilian Secret Service, SBU, have attempted to disturb the recent presidential election in Russia. They did this by, 1, sending forces with US-made equipment, Bradleys, to attack Russian border villages in the direction of Belgorod. This is in the north of Kharkiv, I think. By launching missiles from Czech Vampire RM-70, multiple launch rocket systems toward Belgorod. By launching somewhat successful drone strike against Russian oil refineries. On Wednesday, Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor, had visited Kiev. He was noticed for what he didn't say. Jake Sullivan, U.S. National Security Advisor, has said that Ukraine will win if it comes out of the war as a sovereign, democratic, and free country. At the same time, he didn't mention restoring Ukraine's territorial integrity among the conditions of victory. It is believed that Sullivan delivered a warning to Kiev, as the Financial Times reported. The U.S. has urged Ukraine to halt attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure, warning the drone strikes risk driving up global oil prices and provoking retaliation, according to 3 people familiar with the discussions. The U.S. concern is not about Ukraine, but about Biden's chance for re-election. The U.S. objections come as Biden faces a tough re-election battle this year, with petrol prices on the rise, increasing almost 15% this year to around $3.50 a gallon. Nothing terrifies a sitting American president more than a surge in pump prices during an election year, said Bob McNally, president of consultancy Rapid and Energy and the former White House energy advisor. Sullivan's warning about provoking retaliation was too late. Yesterday, for the first time in 44 days, Russia launched a missile attack against the capital, Kiev. And the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that last night, the Russian aerospace forces delivered a strike by long-range precision weaponry, including Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, at AFU decision-making centers, logistic bases, temporary deployment areas of special operations forces, and foreign mercenaries. The goal of the strike has been achieved. All the targets have been engaged. Another large-scale strike followed today. So today. The primary targets were elements of the electricity infrastructure. Large areas of Ukraine are suffering blackouts after Russian missile targeting energy infrastructure. There is no electricity in the second largest city of Kharkiv, says regional head Oleg Sinehubov. So this is it. Peskov came and he said Russia is in a state of war. Everybody should understand this. Russia will continue to act in such a way that the military potential of Ukraine could not threaten the security of its citizens and its territory, he said in a conversation with reporters. According to the presidential press secretary, Russia cannot allow the existence of a state on its borders that has documented the intention to use any methods to take Crimea from it, not to mention the territory of new regions. Quote, "We are at war. Yes, it started out as a special military operation, but as soon as this little group was formed there, when the collective West became a participant in this on the side of Ukraine, it already became a war for us. I am convinced of this, and everyone should understand this for their internal mobilization, Peskov added. So they're declaring that they're now at war with Ukraine, no more special military operation. And I think that's the reason why the Baltic countries and European countries are now in a panic mode, and they want to prepare their people for war, because they want to send troops to Ukraine for two reasons, as I mentioned, guys. The first reason, they want to take precautions that if the central government in Kiev collapses, so that they could keep control over the western parts of Ukraine, which Russia, in my opinion, doesn't want to include into the Russian Federation or occupy them in any ways. And the second is, and most importantly, is Crimea. Crimea is very, very important. And I think that Russia could go into World War III over Crimea. They're not going to back off from this war, and they're going to use all the means necessary, in my opinion, to protect the Crimea. I just want to show you quickly the map of the battles in Ukraine. So this is the maps of the battles in Ukraine. And if this is the Crimea, and many historic wars have been fought over the Black Sea, and in the 18th century and the 17th century, it's just a normal procedure that happened forever over the Black Sea, and through the Black Sea, the Russians are able to access the warm waters. If they're blocked from the Black Sea, the only way for them to come out to, you can see, all the way to here or all the way from here, it's a very, very difficult situation, geopolitically speaking. And unfortunately, people do not really want, these experts want to tell you the truth of this, or the nature of this conflict in Ukraine, and that is a geopolitical one. And it's been repeated many, many times historically, and it's happening again now. Guys, as I was looking now into my mobile, we have now 59, I don't know if you can see, you cannot see, okay, you cannot see. We have now 59,500 subscribers on Syriana Analysis. We are 500 subscribers away from 60,000 subscribers. I truly believe that Syriana Analysis deserves a lot more of subscribers. So if you're not subscribed and you're watching this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would really appreciate that. And also hit the like button so that this video could reach other people when they log in into their YouTube account. I would really appreciate that, guys. I'm doing this all independent, without sponsorship. Nobody is behind me. Nobody is paying me. You're the one who is paying me, including on Patreon. You can see the link is scrolling, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. Thanks to you, I'm able to continue and stay independent and tell you the truth about what's happening around the world. Guys, it's going to be a weekend now, Saturday and Sunday. On Monday, I'm coming with another guest that he wanted to come to my channel to challenge my ideas. And he wanted to come and discuss and debate with me on the different geopolitical conflicts that we have discussed, we're discussing here. His name is Dani Krikorian. He's Armenian, Syrian too. He lives in the United States. I think he's a professor of political science, and he doesn't agree with me, and he wants to come to my show. I think it would be an interesting live streaming, discussing respectfully with each other. Let's see how it will go. Until then, have a great weekend, guys. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.